So, Hota Gimasuna, Fairbanks South Miunga, Anaka Ich Bauruk, Nuruklik Miunguk, Ataka Su Carl Teeter, Mumtuhisla Miunguk. So, what I said, hello, my name is Rachel Teeter. I'm from Fairbanks, Alaska. My mom is Nancy Kinsey Teeter. She is from St. Mary's, and my father is Carl Teeter. He's from Bethel. And I'm a four-year graduate of Mount Edgecombe High School, and right now I'm attending UAF. I'm getting my bachelor's in math and physics, and ultimately after that, my goal is to help raise up some of the rural communities where my families are from, and become a high school teacher to help inform more people so that they could also help improve our communities. So this summer, I'm a First Alaskans Institute intern, and First Alaskans Institute's mission is true to identity, heritage, and values. Alaska Natives are informed and engaged in leading the decisions that shape the future, and their vision is progress for the next 10,000 years. So the way that ties into this internship is this is a really a leadership internship, so it helps us to improve our leadership skills. One thing that they've been really making sure that we know all summer is that you're not emerging leaders anymore. You are leaders, and the purpose of this internship is to make you better leaders. So, and the way that I got to ISER is First Alaskans, they go through the application process, the interview process, they go through our resume, what are our majors, what are our goals, and then they have companies that they're partnered with, and they give the companies the list of interns that they're working with, and they give the interns the list of companies that they're working with. And they're like, okay, what are your top 5 choices? Who do you want to work with? And based on who the company chooses, who the intern chooses, and our own goals, they decide, okay, where are they going to work the best and be the happiest? Where are they going to make the biggest changes and help out the most? And where are they going to learn the most that's based on their goals in life? Where are they going to make meaningful experiences? So, in case you don't know, ISER's mission is ISER enhances the well-beings of Alaskans and others through nonpartisan research, and that helps people understand social and economic systems and supports informed public and private decision making. And what I thought was really cool is that ISER's mission and First Alaskans' mission and my own personal mission are all sort of really tied together in this way that we want to help improve communities, but in order to do that we want to help inform others so that we could all improve together. So at ISER, it's been a really huge learning experience. The first day I was here, Kyle took me around, he was introducing me to all the people in the office, and I really quickly found out that I'm the youngest here, and I'm surrounded by all these professors and research professionals, and I'm over here still just working to get my bachelor's degree, and everybody's like, oh yeah, I have a doctorate, and I've been working here for 10 years, and I was like, these guys all know what they're doing. So, and incorporated in that, I've had weekly mentoring sessions with different PIs, so it wasn't just me being overwhelmed that everybody knows what they're doing. Everybody here was helping me, and they're like, if you have any questions, feel free to come and see me. If you want to know what's going on, come and see me. So it's been a really huge support here, and I've learned a lot. The second part of what the biggest part of what I've done at ISER, like Erin said, is to work on updating and adding to the Alaska Energy Data Gateway. And that's where Kyle will talk more about it.
Thanks. So my name's Kyle Borash. I'm the computer programmer here at ISER. I started in 2012. The project we are talking about today actually started in 2011. We had an initial public launch of the site in 2013. The AADG started as a public portion of a DOE EPSCoR grant to the UA system. We were one task of the grant, which was intended to increase visibility about wind power systems in Alaska. And so our mission and our task was to create a public portal where anyone in Alaska can easily access and download energy-related data. So what did we do? Well, we created a portal where people could easily download and access energy data, because that's what the grant told us to do. And initially, we were focused on researchers and other people who knew what they were looking for. when they were coming to the site, they just couldn't access it before. And what we found out pretty quickly from community members was there were lots of people who wanted access to this data, but they didn't know what they were looking for, and it was completely overwhelming just to be presented with the entire data sets. So based on that feedback, we immediately created the community data summaries, which gives people a quick look at pertinent information about each community. And these days, about 2/3 of our users pretty much only use the community data summaries portion of the site, and they might look at 10, 20, even 100 community data summaries over the course of their usage of the site, and the other third tends to use the data search tool and a mixture of the community data summary. So initially, like I said, we focused on the energy data sets, things like the PCE program, which was a very valuable data set but wasn't really publicly available before, even though it's a public data set. We also focused on energy statistics, which is a publication ISER used to produce for the Alaska Energy Authority, and it has since been taken over by the Alaska Energy Authority. And fuel prices, things like the AHFC fuel prices, FCS, the Food Cost Survey, which which Rachel will talk about later. So these days, we've continued to expand it thanks to investment from AEA and ISER. We've increased information on the site beyond just energy data, and we've turned it into more of a community information portal. So you can download public information that's available through other sites by the state of Alaska or other organizations, but maybe is hard to access in an aggregated form. Information like education data, which is published by the Department of Education, but it's presented in only one school at a time. So if you had to do research about all schools in Alaska, you can spend a whole week downloading information and then aggregating it. We have erosion information from the Alaska District of the Corps of Engineers. We have employment information from the Alari portal, and AEA has made their Renewable Energy Fund data all public and downloadable through the portal. And over time, as we add more data to the gateway, we've slowly been adding more information to the community data summaries, hopefully making it, a continued valuable resource to the community without overwhelming people with everything all at the same time, because we realize that needs to be more of an curated portion of data. So the future, what are we doing now on the gateway? Well, as Aaron said, we are working with Berkeley National Lab on the Alaska Microgrid Partnership. Our main goal for our portion of the work is to make the gateway even easier to use, have more information presented, and to modernize the look of the AEDG. And so I'm going to show a couple screenshots, perspective UI of a new tool which lets you quickly view all of the data in the gateway for every community all at the same time if you so choose. So as you can see, there's 3 different metric categories that we're separating the data into: financial, human, and technical. After you select one of these metric categories, the map will update with indicators for how complete data is in the gateway for each of these communities. You can select it based on a portion of aggregations, like by AEA Energy Region, census area, in the future, Alaska Native Regional Corporation, other valuable community groupings. And once you've selected your data, below you'll see how it will fill in with every data set in the gateway and the quality of the information for each community. If a community doesn't have any information at all, just have a blank line, and that means that, or just has a hyphen, and that means that this data just isn't available for this community. It's a data set that's not applicable. Examples of this would be PCE. That's just not applicable for communities in the rail belt. They don't participate in the program, and they'll never have PCE data. Whereas if you have a blank circle, that means that the data should be available, but we don't have it for some reason. So that's been a long-term problem with data in Alaska, and our solution to that going forward is we're going to allow community members to indicate data that they might have for their communities and submit it directly to the gateway so that we can increase access to the data, which is currently public data available, but people might not know where to send it. They might not want to host it themselves. So we've created this form which will allow people to choose which data sets they might have information towards and contribute it directly to us. Additionally, if you click one of the metrics themselves, you can see how there'll be some basic metadata about it. It'll have the resolution of the data, the temporality of the data, how much data we have available for that community, the data format, as well as clicking on a link which will take you directly to that data set in our data search tool already filtered to the community you selected. So hopefully that will increase people's ability to use the data search tool without having to go through the hoops of going through each individual variable and choosing what they want. This says, we know what you want, you just told us, we'll take you right there. Okay, hand back off to Rachel.
So obviously the Energy Gateway has been going on since I started this summer. It's been going on for quite a few years now. And when it started, it had to have data, but that data kept growing, and some of the data hasn't been updated recently. So part of my job this summer has been to make that information more current or fill in any holes that, like, there's a few years here that maybe for some reason didn't get uploaded. So for that portion of what I did for the Energy Gateway, I uploaded the AHFC fuel survey data, the food cost survey utilities data, and the ALARI industry, occupation, and summary data, which I'll go into more. So AHFC, the Alaska Housing Finance Corporation, conducts a bi-yearly fuel survey data. So it's conducted in the winter and in the summer to see, like, what are the differences in fuel costs for different times of year when people have different access. And what that includes is fuel price number 1, number 2, propane price, and birch, spruce, and unspecified wood per cord. And previously this wasn't publicly accessible, so people couldn't just go to a site and hit download and then have all of that information. So we worked directly with Jimmy Ord and Scott Waterman of AHFC, and this was the first data set that I had to work with and the first people that we had to work with. So I remember Kyle, he was like, okay, so yeah, you just email Jimmy Ord and he'll send it to you. And I just sort of sat there. I froze. I didn't want to say I didn't want to do it, but I didn't want to do it. And I feel like he caught on because he was like, I could do the introductory if you want. So and then even when I started writing my own emails to them, I remember I just like wrote the email, edited the email, sat there a little bit, edited it some more, sat there some more, and then I just looked at the button send, and I was like, I'll just wait a little bit. Maybe it'll just get better with time. But over the time that I've been here, I've like gotten better at interacting with professionals and emailing people, no sweat. So that's pretty cool. Since this was a bi-yearly survey, we couldn't really label it as like quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. So the way that it's labeled in the gateway is the month and the year. So maybe it'll be like January 2016 or July 2013, something like that. So the way that it appeared in the gateway seemed sort of sporadic because the survey is conducted at different times. It's just winter and summer. So not only did I collect the data that was missing from the gateway, but I also collected all of AHFC's historic data and compared it to all of our historic data so that we were confident that we're not like misrepresenting dates or have data in there that's not from AHFC or the fuel survey data. And for more specifically, what I uploaded that was missing from the gateway is all of 2015, which was January and July, January of 2016, and January of 2017. So now everything's all current on there, and I'm just waiting for the summer report to come out. Yeah.
What's the spatial coverage of the survey, and how many years of data do we have in the portal now?
I think it's from 2001. Yeah,
2001.
Yeah, 2001 to 2017. Yeah.
And what's the spatial coverage there? Do they tend to survey every community, sampling of communities every year?
It's the majority of communities. I don't want to say it's all of them, but it's like at the very least the municipalities. Okay. So it might not represent like unincorporated communities, but it has some of the like it doesn't have Pickus Point, but it has St. Mary's, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So the next data that I updated on the Energy Gateway was the UAF Cooperative Extension Service Food Cost Survey, and what we got from there was actually the utilities information from the food cost survey. And what this includes is, like, it's called a food cost survey, so obviously it includes how much food costs for male from different age ranges, female different age ranges, child from different age ranges, and then a family of 2 and family of 4. What we were interested in for the Energy Gateway was the utilities data, which include the regular gas, propane price, electricity per 1,000 kilowatt hour, and the cost of a 2x4, which is pretty cool. This is downloadable public data, and it's all in either PDF or Excel files. And the link to find all of the data that I talk about will be at the end of the slide. So if you're interested in what this has, you could download the presentation later. But since I looked through some of the most recent quarters of the food cost survey, and I noticed they didn't publish the utilities anymore. So I thought, okay, maybe they have the data, but they don't publish it anymore. So I'd reach out to Brett Lewick and sort of ask him, like, hey, I'm with the Alaska Energy Data Gateway. I'm an intern this summer. Do you have the utilities data? Like, no, we don't collect the utilities data anymore. But now that I see it's useful, maybe we'll do it again. So hopefully, fingers crossed. But after I found out that they don't collect the utilities data anymore, I still wanted to make sure that the Energy Gateway was representing all of the data that was available. So I went through all of the quarters from Q2 of 2013, which is the last one that was in the Gateway, through Q2 of 2017, and I found 3 non-consecutive quarters containing the utilities data, and I uploaded that into the Gateway, which was Q1 and 2 of 2014 and Q2 of 2015. So, and then the final data set that I updated for the Energy Gateway was the ALARI data, and ALARI stands for the Alaska Local and Regional Information. They are a public database, and they have a lot of the census information and the worker characteristics, so broken down by how many people live there, what is the projection of how many people live there, where are people working, and how many people are actually employed. What we have for the Energy Gateway was the employment by industry, employment by occupation, and the employment summary. The employment by industry and occupation is public on their site, so all we had to do there was Kyle used a web scraping code and just collected that from their site because that wasn't downloadable, it was just public. But the employment summary data isn't made public anymore, or it wasn't publicly accessible on their site. So I reached out to Jean Biller, who works with the Alaska Department of Labor, and I got everything from 2011 through 2015 for the employment summary data. What this information includes for industry, it has the city name, the year that it's from, how many people work in what industries, so that's like agriculture or food, et cetera, and it breaks it down by like female, male, 45 and up, and 50 and up. What the occupation includes is do they work in state government, federal government, local government, private sector, or other, and it breaks it down the same way that the industry does. And what the employment summary contains is everything from occupation, and then everything for who has previous experience in all of these different industries, and it breaks it down really specific. So if all we did was upload the occupation data, then there would be a lot of missing information. So, but it was really, whoa. There we go. It was really cool to get to see that the Energy Gateway is made more current, and all the information that's on there is like now up to date, and people can be getting like essentially real-time information. But apart from that, I'm working with the improvement project, and in the improvement project, they want to include more data. So the other part of my job for the Energy Gateway was to look for new data and then look through and make sure it makes sense and then upload it to the Energy Gateway. What I uploaded for that was the Alaska Taxable database information, AEA-sponsored AvTech training information, and the Community Assistance Program information. The Alaska Taxable database contains a myriad of different information for community taxes, but the one that was consistent for all through 2001 to 2016 was the per capita revenue, and they're all downloadable in PDF or Excel files. So what I did there was download the Excel files and went through and made sure it all was consistent formatting, and the community names were matching the Energy Gateway community names. And what this data includes is the community and what taxes they collect. So that's sales tax, property tax, and then other tax, which includes the bed tax, alcohol tax, raw fish tax, tobacco tax, and then other like community-specific taxes, just so that they weren't like listing off a whole bunch. And then the next thing that I uploaded was the Alaska Energy Authority sponsored AvTech training data. This was sent to us directly from Neil McMahon. And what this includes is how many people from a specific community were sponsored by AEA to get AvTech training in a specific field. So for example, in 2005, 2 people from AccuChuck were sponsored by AEA to get their bulk fuel operator certificate. This wasn't publicly accessible, so you couldn't like Google like AEA sponsored AvTech training and then hit download. So like I said, Neil McMahon sent it to us to give us a more well-rounded representation of communities training and essentially education. So since it wasn't publicly available, I worked a lot with Neil McMahon other than just him sending the data so that we could accurately represent it, because it is new data and we want to make sure that when people download the information, they're not thinking they're reading one thing, but actually it means another. So I've been working on the metadata, which is like the data dictionary, so that we could accurately represent what information we have. The third and final data set that I imported into the gateway was the Community Assistance Program. This is formally known as the Community Revenue Sharing Program. So when I was first looking it up, I kept looking on the Division of Community and Regional Affairs. I kept looking for the words community revenue sharing, and I was honestly getting a little frustrated because I couldn't find it, and I kept seeing things like community aid and accountability, and I was like, no, I feel like that's something different. And then I finally found the Community Assistance Program status reports, and I was like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for this whole time. And then I saw underneath it, it was like, formerly known as Community Revenue Sharing. Okay. So this program was established in 2008 with their first payouts to communities in 2009. And they have different levels of limits for, like, is it a municipality, is it a borough, is it an unincorporated community? And then based on that, if the specific community doesn't have a need for like $96,000, then what they do is they give them a payout based on per capita. So like maybe there's 300 people in the community, so they give them $3,000, so $10. But it's not that low, but that's just an example. So what the status report includes is there's one for municipalities and one for unincorporated government. What an unincorporated community, sorry. What an unincorporated community is something like a tribal government or somebody who provides basic public services, like, for example, like libraries and buses and such. And in order for a community to qualify and have their payment authorized, they have to provide an application, so obviously they need to apply to get this money. And then municipalities have to include their budget for either the fiscal year of the grant or the calendar year 2 years prior. So, or not 2 years, 1 year prior. So for example, if you're applying for a grant for 2017, you have to provide the budget for 2017 or for the fiscal year of 2017 or for the calendar year of 2016. And also the municipalities have to include their audit or their certified financial statement for 2 years prior to the grant. These are all downloadable in PDF files, but for the Energy Gateway, we needed them in either Excel or CSV. So when I found that out, I was like emailing a bunch of people, and for all of the people that I contacted in the past, everybody was giving me same-day responses, so I just got really used to it. And then when I emailed the Division of Community and Regional Affairs, I was waiting for like maybe 2 days. And I was like, I'm not used to this, I just want the data right now. So I started reaching out to my fellow interns with First Alaskans, and I was just sort of joking around at first. I was like, oh yeah, if any of you have connections with DCRA for some reason. And one of the other interns was like, oh yeah, my friend is there in the research and analysis section. And I was like, that's the exact section that I needed. So it was really cool. After after like another half day, people were all like responding to me and really being helpful from DCRA. So that was really cool. Oh, and for the community assistance program, I uploaded all of the historical data, so from 2009 to 2017. So this is a lot of new data for the Energy Gateway that people might not know what can you do with, or like how can somebody look at this from a community member perspective. So what I did was a community-specific trend analysis using the Alaska Taxable information and the community assistance program. So the first community that I looked at is St. Mary's, because my family's from there, and I just wanted to see, okay, how's the revenue going? How much money do you guys have? So what I looked at, this is the revenue. Oh wait, this is the revenue trends through the years for St. Mary's, and you could see in 2009, the green is where the community assistance program began. So there's a whole new bar there, and you can see in 2007, they began collecting other tax instead of just sales tax, which is the blue. And you can also see in 2015, there's a really noticeable spike in the sales tax income. So what I decided, I made a graph of the total revenue, so this includes all of their tax revenue and all of their revenue from the community assistance program. And you could see before 2009, it was very steady, just above 100,000 from their tax revenue. And then after 2009, there's this huge spike, and then it gets somewhat inconsistent. Like you can see, there's a dip in 2013. Or no, there's a spike in 2012. It's not a dip in 2013. There's a spike in 2012, which is consistent with the spike in 2012 and 2013 in the community revenue sharing. And you can see there's another spike in 2015, which is consistent with the spike in the sales tax revenue. And after looking at St. Mary's and seeing, okay, how did their taxes in the community assistance program affect their total revenue, I wanted to look at a different community. And when I was going through the database, Pilot Point stood out to me as something that was sort of all over the place. It had a lot of inconsistency, so I wanted to look further into that. For those of you that don't know, it's on the Upper Aleutians. It's in the Lake and Peninsula Borough, and it's just south of Dillingham. This, you could see, it relied mainly on other tax, which is very different than St. Mary's, which relied on sales tax and then slowly incorporated other tax. But here you could see it relied on other tax all the way up until 2015, where it completely stopped collecting other tax and only collected sales tax. And you could see, again, the community assistance program starting in 2009, and then that same spike in 2012 and 2013. So they got more money also. It wasn't just St. Mary's. But you can also see in 2004 through 2006, they got very little compared to everything else in their other taxes. So again, I was like, what does this mean for their total revenue? You could see before the community assistance program started, they were kind of low, but making a large jump towards that direction anyway, except for, again, 2004 through 2006. And then you could see there's a big drop in 2010 and a big drop in 2014, which is consistent with their drops in other taxes. So comparing these two communities, which is what I wanted to do, which is why I chose two different communities, the similarities between them, they're both rural communities, so it's not like I'm comparing someplace like St. George Island with Anchorage, so it's not like they have difficulties in accessing things. And they both had a dramatic increase in revenue after the community assistance program started, which I would hope so, because now they're just not relying on only themselves anymore. And after the community assistance program, both of them had more noticeable differences in their data. The differences between the communities, so Pilot Point is a fishing community. It's on the Aleutians, and when I looked deeper into what is the other taxes that they're collecting, why were they so able to rely on those for all those years, it's because their other taxes were raw fish taxes, and that's also part of the reason why it spiked and dipped more than what St. Mary's showed. because different people could maybe fish from Pilot Point or go to maybe Dillingham. Like, fishing isn't very consistent every year. But St. Mary's relied on other sales because it's not a fishing community, and relied on sales tax instead of other taxes. And they're slowly incorporating that, and when I looked deeper into that, it's because they started taxing alcohol and tobacco tax, so their revenue is just slowly increasing at a consistent rate, much like their sales tax. And one thing that I thought was just interesting and noteworthy was that Pilot Point relied on other tax for so long, and then suddenly they just cut it all out, and they're like, let's just do sales tax. So I'd be interested in seeing, do they continue that throughout the years, and like, what are their goals going to be? These are all a lot of the questions that it raises. Like I said, will these trends continue through the years, and is there differences between other types of rural communities? And Muhsin Gutabi, he's an assistant professor of economics here at ISER. He did a report similar to this at the borough level, and now that it's accessible on the Alaska Energy Data Gateway, anybody can do this type of research. Anybody who's curious, who has questions. If you have more questions based on this analysis that I showed you, you can be able to get this information and like look deeper into it. And so now that I've showed you what I've done, I wanted to share a little more about what I've learned, because First Alaskans, this is a leadership internship. This is meant for me to learn a lot. So the two main times that I learned were through ISER mentoring, which I mentioned in the beginning, and through First Alaskans leadership training, both in the first week of the internship and on every other Friday throughout. Some of the big takeaways that I learned from this is that like your background doesn't have to define your present. So in First Alaskans, I heard of a lot of people who I met a lot of people who I've heard about growing up who I always thought, wow, these are such strong Native leaders, and they're like so powerful, and they just know what they're doing. And then, excuse me, and then hearing their stories, like they weren't always like that. They like initially thought, oh, I'm from a rural community, I can't like make it in these big time corporate areas, or oh, like my family's kind of poor, I can't go to college. And then adding to this, in my mentoring time, I learned that, excuse me, I learned that a lot of the professors here who are like really into their research and really have this dedicated path were going through college and had this one-track mind for something totally different, and when they realized like, no, this isn't really what I want to do, they weren't held back by that. They were able to change their course and find something that they were making a difference in and being happier in. The second thing that I learned was every obstacle has its own way, its own path to an answer. So during my mentoring times, I would ask all of the PIs, I was like, so how do you conduct your research? And most of them would like, oh, get into it and be like, oh, for this study I did this, and for this study I did this. And I noticed like a lot of similarities between how they conducted their research. But when I was meeting with Joe Walker, I asked him, and before he even said anything, he told me, it's always the question that guides the actions. And I was like, that's true, because you can't just start with a problem and think you're going to take the same direction to find a solution for a different problem. Every question, every obstacle has its own way, and they're all going to lead to different answers. So I thought that was pretty cool. The third thing that I learned is that Excel is really super awesome if you know what you're doing, which at the beginning of the summer I was really lost in Excel, and Kyle kept sending me these Excels, and people kept sending me the Excels, and they would tell me, okay, can you like make sure that the community names match up? Can you add in this community specific ID? And I was like, I'm gonna have to go through 300 communities and compare each one. I don't want to do that. And then I kept hearing of all these different programs, all these different functions, all these different equations, and it just made everything super smooth. And now I feel like I'm pretty good at Excel. I know there's a lot more to learn, but I feel pretty confident. And then finally what I learned is to speak up about your problems, because you never know who has the connections. So like I said earlier, I was working with DCRA, and I was just getting really impatient, and I wanted to be spoiled with the same day responses again. But I was joking around at the internship just because I had the mic and I didn't really know what else to say. And then I mentioned, like, oh, if any of you have connections at DCRA, and it turns out somebody did. So, so you never know who has the background that can get you the connections to where you're trying to go. So now I threw a lot of information at you. If you have any questions, I have answers.
So how many data sets do we have? And of those, how many are energy related?
On the gateway? I don't know.
This leads to a second question.
I don't know exactly what the breakdown would be, but I'd say probably 50% of them are energy related still, and the other 50% are socio and economic data sets about communities.
My second question is, are you thinking about a name for this that's memorable, short, attractive, and in its acronym that's a word
Like the AEDG?
stands for something like Leo, you know?
Toby.
There we go.
That's it.
Big yes data set.
Anyway, just, and of course my question I raised to Kyle then, this is really a data gateway for all Alaskans and maybe beyond Alaska. And so thinking about Alaska now, still, you know, the download rates are really going up, but there's still, if you're in a rural community, often you have still really slow internet. So I just wanna, you know, I know it's gonna change. You know, the technology is finally gonna catch up to what people want and have high-speed internet everywhere. But until we get to that point, I think we need to be cautious of providing the platform for all of them so that they can get the data also in a reasonable way in most of them. Oh, and another data source you might consider is the waterborne statistics or engineers data. That may be interesting to see what goods and communities and volumes are moving in and out of those communities.
Has there been any thought about building an API so that other software programs can access the data automatically as opposed to going through the interface?
So we've been working on an API, and we have a private API right now for AEA because they have the Alaska Affordable Energy Model, and they're getting their inputs to their model out of the gateway. And the goal will be to have a publicly available one at some point, but you know, it's a matter of resourcing both, you know, time and having money to even dedicate towards something like that, and you know, having the value proposition be high enough that it's worth working on that task versus something else.
Right.
Mhm.
Does the private API just access a few of the data sets or one of the data sets?
So it's not all of them right now, and the API doesn't directly access the data sets like it does in the community portal or the public facing. You're responsible for creating the data sets yourself out of the models in the database. So you have direct access to the tables in the database, but you then have to link them together based on the referentials and whatnot, references between them.
And I will add to Kyle's response, this initial project that we're working on to improve the gateway, we're hoping to use as a springboard from which to ask for more funding, because a lot of people are very excited about these initial improvements. So hopefully there will be resources to continue doing some of this.
Yeah, no, this looks great. It's awesome.
So I'm wondering, when you've called people or emailed people, one, did they know about the data gateway already? And two, I'm thinking about Kyle, who has been so good at writing those bots to get data that's not easily available, but are they starting to look at you and say, we give you that data without you having to go through this?
Well, first off, when I would email new people, I I felt like I was always doing the same introduction paragraph. And I go, hi, my name is Rachel Teeter. I'm a First Alaskans Institute intern. I'm working with ISER on the Alaska Energy Data Gateway. And then I'd put a link. And then I would describe, the Alaska Energy Data Gateway is, and then I would like put a brief description. So I'm not sure if that like answered people's questions before they had the questions, or if like everybody just already knew what it was and they just didn't want to tell me, oh, you told me extra information. So just in case people weren't sure what it was, I like made sure that they did in the beginning, so that like they could focus on the data that I was asking for, if that makes sense. And then what was the second question?
So the second question is, did they say, oh, well, we have this data, we'll give it to you after we'd already gone through some, so Department of Education.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So in
Yeah.
other words,
So-
Department of Education has now said, oh, we'd give you that data, which was not the response, because people change who are in those positions. And so as long as the current people are there, we don't have to do what we had to do before for education data. But Department of Labor data, that's an interesting question about why
Yeah,
are we
so-
having to crack rather than having them give us that data.
So we have an MOU with the Department of Labor for them to provide this data directly to us, but because of budget cuts in the state of Alaska and staffing availability, we've had to go back to how we got the data before we had the MOU, which is getting it directly off their site.
More money is needed.
But, you know, for all the new data sets that Rachel worked on for like the AHFC stuff, you know, we have a connection with them now, and they told us, oh, here's when we publish the data, we'd be happy to send it directly to you in the future. You know, here's the time of year when you can contact us, and we'll have the data ready for you, and we're happy to share it in the future. So that's great. But as far as direct access to like other databases or them proactively sending it to us, we haven't gotten to that point yet. But maybe if people use the site enough and they see the value, then it becomes a place where they want to put their data, so they can have it in front of as many people as possible. Because all the data we have in the gateway is data that should be public and it should be easy to find, and unfortunately that just hasn't been the case.
So you mentioned kind of an open source crowdsourcing sort of way for communities to upload their own data sets, right? So my question would just be, does that data that they upload, does that have to go through you before it shows up on the website?
So that's our plan at this time. You know, obviously that takes administrative time on our side to review that data, and it would be better if we could not do that, because then they could have their data up. But we would have to have some kind of critical mass of people involved with the project who we could have trustworthy reviewers at the community level who we know could look at the data themselves as a volunteer type, you know, task and say, yes, this data looks good. I'm someone who's been in good standing for years with the site, and I approve that this is good data, and that could be something that we do long term. But, you know, as far as the shorter term of just having this ability for communities to, you know, directly contribute without us having to find the data, that's planned to be going through someone on our side just to ensure integrity of the data and quality of the data that they're submitting.
We're not sure how much it will be used. It's sort of an experiment just to see if it catches on. I mean, we're kind of hoping, you know, in the new sort of the new mock-up site that Kyle showed you, where it shows the availability of data. What we would love to do is have communities, you know, see themselves stacked up against other communities and say, oh, hey, you know, that community has got all their data ducks in a row. We should really do this, you know, and then email the site administrator and say, hey, you know, we do have this data. Friendly competition, if you will. And the ulterior motive is, you know, communities that have, you know, readily available data should be more appealing, you know, for energy project developers and investors and things like that, and hopefully they will reap the benefits of that in a time where we have declining state funds for such projects. And so we're hoping it sort of self-motivates the communities to provide that data that would attract that kind of involvement.
I have a question. So, one, what's the difference between isn't there an Alaska Energy Data Inventory? And what's
So, yeah, that's a great question. The Alaska Energy Data Inventory actually existed before the Alaska Energy Data Gateway. It is primarily / / only a site that holds reports created by the Alaska Energy Authority. And so it's just a catalog of PDF reports and other things of that nature tied to specific projects they worked on throughout the state. So it has a limited subset of information and pretty much only about projects they've worked on, or feasibility studies for things of that nature. So that's more of a document catalog, whereas the Alaska Energy Data Gateway is a place to get community-centric information in a structured database format that you could then manipulate with Excel or whatever tools you want to use.
Okay. And then I've talked with Scott Waterman about making, because he said that they're currently at a HFC working to get the ARIS database, non-residential building inventory data, public. And is that going to be incorporated into the Alaska Energy Data Gateway at all?
So I sure hope so, and I know AEA has been working with AHFC on getting this data public and whatnot, and they've made overtures that the gateway could be a great place for some of that or lots of it, but I'm not privy to exactly what their plans are at this time.
Because it sounds like, when you say the competition between communities and comparing, that sounds like a perfect example too of how they can compare. I'm working on that right now, so it's very much within my realm of interest. So
yeah,
cool. Thank you.
Dewey?
Great job making all this information approachable. I feel like I barely made it through statistics, but I just like how you broke it down. I was curious, having all this access to this information that's being gathered, has that informed some of the questions that you're wanting to drive and some of your own advocacy interests?
Like for my goals in life, or just like, have I gotten more interested in stuff?
So all this information, right? What are you going to do with it? How does that inform where you're headed?
I think it really helps because it's now giving a more well-rounded sense of communities, and it's like the Alaska Taxable and Community Revenue. It shows like where are the community's financial standings, how are they able to provide these basic public services, how are they able to really upkeep their community, and then the training information, what are the community's goals for like the young people, where are they aiming for, and are they getting more like academia education, are they getting more training, for what different areas are they getting training. So I think it's really interesting for me to see like where will my time be of the most use to help improve, and in what areas should I spend my time to improve on before working on next steps. So that's just my personal.
You said you wanted to become a teacher. It seems like you're pretty good at research.
Well, that sounds like something I said.
You also said I should do computer programs.
Well,
teachers who can research will better inform students of the research.
Yes.
So.
Tell the professor, I think.
Action research. Teachers collaborating with university faculty on this and getting their students involved in research.
You see, all of the goals align here. It's all, everything is working together. It's the circle of life.
We can just figure out what college education is.
True. Oh.
So you didn't answer Toby's question about in particular the energy in the name is the function of expanse. So how, in terms of sustainability of this project going ahead and getting other users, is it,
That's right.
the vision of having it more than an energy data gateway, is that part of where we see this going?
Well, it already is more than an
Right.
energy data gateway, and I think there's probably some politics as to how it became named the Alaska Energy Data Gateway. You're asking about how we will sustain it in the future?
Well, in particular, there's a couple of interrelated issues. One is if users see the name energy, they may not realize it's a gateway to stuff. That it's a convenient gateway to a variety of stuff. And the comment that Kyle made about people being willing to tell us when the data is available, ideally you get to the point where the data is seen as being so useful that there's a function for people to actually upload
Right.
the updates. If you get to the point where you're clearly the place that your data is being, you're sort of a clearinghouse for data related to Alaska, I guess. So it's that question, how do we see the steps of, make it both sustaining it rather than from grant to grant, but also getting to the point where people take part of the load off us of constantly going and searching out the updates.
Right. Sustaining it financially is something I and Lunchtime Lab have had a lot of conversations about, and that's an ongoing conversation. We're doing our best to leverage more funding. You and I have even talked about potentially incorporating it into, the library system at the university at some point, so maybe it could become institutionalized. And these are all just ideas at this point. In terms of making it a place where people go to get more than just energy data, I mean, maybe that begs the question that it needs to have sort of a branding change at some point. And I think we're certainly open to that possibility. I think making this new interface that Kyle showed, it'll be interesting to see what kind of interest that generates before we take that step of perhaps rebranding it. And we're really excited. We'll probably be rolling that out this fall in October or November. And the version that he showed you, is just bare bones. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles yet, but that's sort of the architecture of how it will all work. We'll see what the response is. We've done a lot of sort of stakeholder meetings along the way to make sure that we're getting the input and the feedback, and that it will be something useful. I'm cautiously optimistic that it'll take off, but and if it is successful, we'll think about what that means for how the site identifies itself. Does that answer your question? The short answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
Somewhat related. Did I hear that Anchorage was one of the cities that got a grant from one of these foundations to integrate data into its management systems?
Probably.
The management system they haven't been able to update?
Remember, there are foundations out there who are supporting, particularly at cities level, the idea that making data more accessible will allow cities to do things more efficiently. Did they apply for one of those?
I don't
Did they get it?
know if they got it. I know that the city does have what's called a chief innovation officer, who actually used to be an ASEP employee, Brendan Babb, and he has a big emphasis on integrating information into usable interfaces. And I don't know if that's related to a grant that they received or not.
So they have a grant through one of Michael Bloomberg's charities.
Oh,
Yeah.
And then I think there's some other things they've been working on lately, and I do believe they just recently got either additional funding through that original grant, or they have received a new grant to basically, like you said, increase the use of data in decision making, to kind of have an analytical reason for why you're making a decision at the local government level, instead of just, we think this is going to do what we want and we're going to go ahead and do it because you voted for us.
Yeah, it's where it's an I-team grant is what they're calling it.
Okay.
It's a 3-year, $500,000 a year.
And actually, as a plug for next week, I'm going to embarrass Jacob here. The Bloomberg Foundation, I didn't actually realize that was related to information accessibility, but Anchorage is participating in this compact of mayors, and part of that involvement is also applicable to developing climate action plans and greenhouse gas inventory. And Jacob, who's sitting in the corner there, has been working on that all summer for us, and he will be speaking about that next Friday here at noon. So lots of really interesting things happening.
And there is also an international linkage, which Gwen Holdman at ASEP and I are part of a group in Canada and Alaska that are talking about how you build renewable energy projects in collaboration with indigenous communities across the north. And part of it is capacity building, and to actually help communities do kind of capacity mapping. And so this kind of data, from things like adding in the AvTech training and the educational data, allows communities to then, sort of have a jump start on being able to self-assess. Do we have people in the places that we need to, with the right skill set, to develop and manage these kinds of projects? And so, so that's another piece that will add to this, is actually an international collaboration around this work.
Any more questions? All right, let's thank Rachel and Kyle again.
Those are all the links that I talked
Yeah, you
about.
should be able to download this presentation off of ISER's website.
Click.
So you don't need to write them all down.
Yeah.
It'll be on the front page if you just go to iser.uaa.alaska.edu.
Front and
And
center.
that new piece you put together, that is live or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We'll be releasing end of September.
Okay.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, thank you.
You learned.